Chapter 57. A Harpy and a Slime. With the meeting with Gazel concluded, Rimuru let out a sigh, his shoulders relaxing as he made his way to his office. He knew he needed to regroup with everyone who had returned from Walpurgis, but as he approached the door, a surprising sense of dread settled in his stomach. Yet, that dread was quickly replaced with warmth as he saw Ramiris shoot at him the moment the door opened. Flying with surprising speed, she made her way to claim her rightful throne, his head. Ah, Dino always makes fun of me for being small, but he's missing out, Ramiris muttered with a satisfied sigh, before poking her head out and looking at him. Yo, Rimuru, I vote to forgive Malim. Fry rolled her eyes slightly as she heard Ramiris. Ignore her. Those two started to scheme something after they stopped messing around. Tisk, that's not fair. Why you gotta go and snitch on me? Ramiris asked with slight annoyance. Not being able to hold back his chuckle, he spoke up. I'm not mad at Malim. She's just gonna have to survive without snacks for a week or so. There's no need to make a big deal out of it. But if you want, you can tell her that you convinced me to lower her punishment to only 4 days. He heard Ramiris instantly burst out into a burst of happy laughter as she heard him, her wings fluttering as she instantly took to the air again. All right, that's great. I'll go to the labyrinth, and I'll let her know, she announced before quickly shooting through the air, with Beretta quickly chasing after while Trainee leisurely followed. With Ramiris gone, Rimuru turned to Shion, only to find his mood souring slightly at the sight of her pouting expression. Her usual confidence was absent, replaced by a look of quiet frustration. Noticing his gaze, Shion spoke up. I hesitated to protect you. I kept it in during Walpurgis because I didn't want the other demon lords to look down on you. But I failed you. She paused, her fists clenched as she recalled the moment Viola had attacked. I know you told us you wanted to deal with Clayman, but I should have acted. I'm supposed to be your shield, your knight. But when it came down to it, I failed you. Rimuru felt a wave of discomfort wash over him as he listened to her. It wasn't often that his mood swung so much, but the memories of the fragmented future still lingered at the back of his mind. Yet, he quickly pushed those thoughts aside, focusing on Shion. No, Rimuru said firmly, his tone gentle but resolute as he tried to comfort her. You did exactly as I asked you to. Thanks to that, I was able to leave an impression on the rest of the demon lords. But, Shion began yet stopped as she noticed Rimuru's expression turn serious. Shion, this isn't our final battle. When the time comes, you can show me your full strength. But I need you to promise me something. If I ever tell you to run, promise me you will. The atmosphere in the room shifted slightly with the request. Fry narrowed her eyes. Shizue's expression became uncomfortable, and Shion herself looked confused and worried. Is something wrong? Shion asked, stopping momentarily. He gave her a gentle chop on the top of her head with his hand. No, I was just making sure that my stubborn knight won't blame herself in the future if I ask her not to step in. Rimuru teased with a warm smile. Shion pouted slightly, rubbing the spot where he'd playfully tapped her. Well, when you put it that way, Shion muttered, her expression turning determined. I won't. Unless I am actively getting in your way, I will protect you. That is my purpose. Rimuru couldn't help but sigh as he heard her answer. But he couldn't blame her either. He could see the affection in her eyes as she spoke, so with a simple nod, he agreed. If it truly came to it, he could forcefully teleport her away using Uriel. All right, Rimuru answered. Just remember to be careful. Then, to lower the slight tension he had caused, he turned to Shizue. She was holding a small blonde fox that was curiously, yet cautiously looking at him. The moment the fox noticed him looking at her, she instantly cowered, using Shizue's body as protection. Now, you must be one of Clayman's 5 fingers, aren't you? Rimuru asked, gently reaching his hand for the fox to smell it. I broke the curse Clayman had placed on you. But then I got so focused on making sure Walpurgis went well that I didn't even have a chance to meet you. The fox hesitated for a moment, then cautiously sniffed his hand before resting its small head on his palm, as if trying to thank him for releasing the curse. Do you want to stay over in Tempest now? Rimuru asked, giving the fox a warm smile before continuing. We have treats? Shizue chuckled lightly at his words. gently nudging the fox forward so Rimuru could pick her up. I found her hiding after you left with Valentine. Poor little thing must have been scared to death. Gently grabbing the fox, he could feel the pure power the little thing had. It was strange, but the small fox itself was probably strong enough to hold back, if not defeat Ranga on pure magicules alone. Gently scratching the fox's head, he felt her relax in his arms. Whatever role they played for Clayman, they were now latching onto the safest option, which was Shizue, and by proxy, Rimuru. Would you like a name? He offered. Instantly, the small fox let out a slight bark, nodding her head eagerly as her 3 tails began to sway gently. The majority of the names he could think of from the top of his head were all stupid, and he would feel bad if he gave the small fox a name like Vulpix or Tails. Even Karama, the 9-tailed fox, would feel like a bad omen to put on the small fox. The last thing he wanted was for a monster that would need the Talk No Jutsu to become friendly. However, he didn't think long as he swapped the letters around slightly. How about Kamara? He asked, instantly feeling a portion of his magicules get drained away instantly. The small fox let out a happy bark before jumping down from his arms and running around in circles around him, full of energy. In the end, Shizue couldn't help but chuckle as she leaned down to pick the small fox up. I should probably start getting ready to head to Inglacia to pick up the kids. Shizue chimed in, gently petting Kamara's head. Do you need me to do anything before I leave? No, just make sure that the transfer goes well. Rimuru answered. You should probably go rest too, Shion. There will be some envoys arriving tomorrow, and I'd like you to be in the meeting. Shion nodded, and though she wanted to stay, she left along with Shizue, leaving Rimuru alone with Fry. Once the door snapped closed, Fry turned to look at Rimuru, her eyes still narrowed. Care to explain what's going on? She asked. Everything went according to plan, but you are off. Did something happen with Roy? Rimuru let out a sigh as he heard the question. He didn't want to tell Shion, because that would only cause her to become more protective of him. And if the time came, he would rather if she didn't take a stand for him. Ramiris was a different story. This sort of heavy news would just make her stressed out. She was quite happy at the moment, and he wanted to keep things that way. He had fully intended to tell Shuna and discuss it with her, but now that Fry asked, he hesitated on whether or not to be fully honest with her. Yet, she was the second strongest after him. That is if you ignored Veldora, who was far stronger than either of them. She was smart, cunning, and strong. If destruction was coming, she would be one of his strongest allies. And the more she knew, the more she would be able to help. He had already made the choice, yet what he saw only solidified his decision. As he looked at her, he could see that she was genuinely concerned for him, though she was trying not to show it. I saw a possible future. You could say it's still fresh. Rimuru began, walking to look out of his window again as the citizens began to exit the labyrinth. It's a future I would like to avoid. Fry nodded as she heard him. By now, the prophet lie had spread to the point where no one in Tempest would question him on his ability to see the future. If anything, it was to be expected. Raphael had been able to stop before catching the attention of the so-called administrator, but that didn't mean they were safe now. He would be on guard for any attacks that could hurt or target his skills from now on, so he was fairly sure that he had already taken a massive step to prevent that future. Yet, there were still a lot of questions. As these thoughts weighed on him, Frey's expression softened. She stepped closer, coming to stand beside him. She, too, began to look out of the window, going quiet as she tried to gather her thoughts. Could you show me? She asked quietly, her eyes still focused on the view outside. At her request, Rimuru created a link through thought communication and gave her some brief glimpses. He didn't share the last fragment in which the one who had given him the memories died, but what he shared was enough to cause Frey's expression to stiffen. Is this a guaranteed future? She asked, her eyes closing as she replayed the images in her mind, searching for any sign of hope. No. They stood there together, side by side, sharing the silence of the moment. Then, without a word, one of Frey's wings unfurled and gently wrapped around him, pulling him slightly closer. So, what are your plans now? Don't tell me you're going to give up, Fry asked, glancing outside before turning to look at him. Rimuru let out a soft yet tired chuckle, the sound breaking the tension. He turned to her, offering a warm smile that was both reassuring and determined. What else? We grow, we prepare, and when the time comes, Rimuru began, his expression growing more and more determined. We destroy them. A small yet genuine smile appeared on Frey's face as she heard him. It's strange, Frey muttered, her voice soft as she looked into his eyes. I don't understand it myself, but I believe you. As she spoke, the wing wrapped around Rimuru drew him a little closer, closing the distance between them. Minutes passed in the comfortable silence, with Frey's wing holding him closely in a protective manner. As they stood silently, the small discomfort that continued to linger inside of him finally vanished. This is nice, Rimuru mused, chuckling slightly. And as he turned to look at Frey, he couldn't help but be left slightly speechless. She looked exactly the same as before, but her concerned expression tugged at his heart. The warmth of her body next to him as she tried to comfort him. It was amusing, but he recognized the feeling. He felt it briefly from time to time with her, but never quite as strong as it was now. I just remembered something. Rimuru mused, reaching to gently caress the feathers gently covering him. What is it? Frey asked, raising an eyebrow. Walpurgis is over. Rimuru answered with a warm smile as he turned to look at her. Frey asked before she burst out into a beautiful laughter. You can't be serious, can't you? Right now? Really? Rimuru stepped out of her wings before a pair of wings sprouted out from behind him, which he used to cover his own body, pretending to be shy. What can I say? I am a tad bashful. Rimuru joked. You look ridiculous, Frey teased, which caused Rimuru to hide his face with his wings. Rimuru's wings fluttered playfully before he peeked his head out, using his most innocent expression. Ridiculous? And here I was trying to be nice and shy for you. Rimuru joked before his expression turned mischievous. Taking a few steps forward, he spread his wings, covering most of his office and creating an imposing view. Better? Rimuru asked, the mischievous expression on his face causing Frey to roll her eyes before she, too, spread her wings. Frey's fingers traced the delicate lines of a feather she had given Rimuru, a small smile appearing on her lips. That's some nice feathers. I wonder who you got them from. Her voice was soft, almost teasing, as she admired the feather. Oh, just a cunning and beautiful queen, Rimuru answered, leaning in slightly. I didn't even have to say a word for her to jump in and help me convince some nasty demon lords to ally themselves with our empire. Oh, empire, Frey echoed, getting closer too, as a mischievous expression appeared on her face. I almost forgot. I guess I am messing around with the Emperor, the newest and meanest demon lord. Rimuru reached out, gently caressing her wings. The touch sent a pleasant shiver through her, causing her wings to flutter slightly in response. I feel like we make a pretty good match. I bully Clayman, and you bully Carrion. The other demon lords should watch out. Carrion, that annoying lion. He's been more resilient than I hoped. I was sure he was going to join Tempest after he resigned as a demon lord, but I might have to go over there and smack him around for a bit. I have a promise to keep, don't I? Frey asked. Rimuru smiled in response. Let's forget about Eurazania for a while. We have enough on our plates. We can go mess with him after we get full control over Gistav and Falmouth. Rimuru answered, looking her in the eyes. She smiled for a moment before her expression became slightly complicated, almost annoyed at herself. You can't be serious. Was that really it? That was all I was missing, she muttered, taking a step closer to him, almost pressing her body against his. Rimuru couldn't help but let his eyes wander for a moment on her body, to which Frey let out a strange hum. Looking at her in the eyes, Rimuru saw her bring her face closer, almost as if taunting him. The two of them were close enough to almost touch noses, and reacting instinctively, Rimuru finished leaning closer, sealing her soft lips with a kiss. Frey's body relaxed as she returned the kiss, her wings slowly lowering until they rested behind her. This gave Rimuru an opening to cover her with his own wings, wrapping the two of them and bringing her closer. Yet, before they could get carried away, Fry placed a hand on his chest and gently, but firmly pushed him back. "You have kept me waiting for some time, you know," Fry said, her voice taking on a playful, yet teasing tone. Her eyes sparkled with mischief as she mockingly reprimanded him. "Charybdis, obtaining the spirits, awakening war. I don't blame you for holding off and being busy, but—" She trailed off, her expression shifting to one of exaggerated hurt, as if she had just been deeply wronged. "Oh, and what should I do to make up for it?" he asked, playing along with her. Fry brought a hand to her chin, tapping it a few times in mock contemplation before nodding decisively, as if coming to a profound conclusion. "Since you made me wait, the least you could do is make it special." Her eyes darted around the room, taking in their surroundings with a critical gaze. Then, with an exaggerated sigh, she shook her head. "An office? TSK, TSK, TSK. Rimuru laughed as he heard her, but he couldn't help but agree. A few ideas coursed through his mind before he nodded. "You're absolutely right," he admitted, smacking his forehead. "Should I take that to mean that you have something in mind?" Fry asked, raising an eyebrow in genuine curiosity, yet keeping up her playful voice. "Wouldn't want to spoil the surprise now, would I?" Fry smiled at his answer, and in one swift movement, she made an obsidian mirror appear behind her. "Well then, Mr. Emperor," Fry purred, her voice low and filled with playful challenge as she took a few deliberate steps backward, closer to the mirror. "I'll give you a few days. Don't keep me waiting." Giving Rimuru one final wink, she took another step back into the mirror. The moment she entered the mirror, it shattered. The small pieces vanished in an instant, leaving Rimuru alone in his office. After a moment of silence, Rimuru let out a sigh as realization set in. She was kinda mad, wasn't she? "Answer." "Somewhat. Would you like an in-depth explanation?" Raphael asked, to which Rimuru shook his head. He knew where he had messed up. I forgot to tell her about Sarion's envoys," Rimuru muttered. Since Sarion and Fulbrosia had a somewhat hostile relationship, he wanted to ask her for details, but he should probably not follow her right now. It would be fine, probably. Chapter 58, Sarion's Envoys. A group of elves moved through the forest of Jura atop Rune Elks. They all wore elegant cloaks that covered their appearances and armor. They could have used teleportation magic or even their famous airships, yet that would have drawn too much attention. They were on a mission to meet with the ruler of monsters, Rimuru Tempest, and they wanted to avoid giving the wrong first impression. So they moved through the forest as any other would. They had received a lot of information about Rimuru and Tempest from one of the Empress's best friends, Elian Grimwald. Yet they still wanted to remain careful and see firsthand what kind of place Tempest was. At first, they had prepared themselves for a long journey through the forest, but on their way, they stumbled upon a road connecting Fulbrosia and Tempest. It was an absolute shock to see the level of detail and quality that was placed. Building something like it would take them at least a decade. The logistics of keeping everyone on task would be a nightmare. Yet here it was, built in less than a year. The road only helped to confirm Fry and Rimuru's relationship, though it also made them wonder if the road to Dworgen shared the same level of quality. A road like this would significantly increase the trade and merchants who could move to and from Sarion. They had teleportation circles set up in most major cities. Yet to prevent attack from the inside, the circles were used only by high-ranking nobility or people under special supervision. On their way through the carefully built roads, they stumbled upon their first group of monsters. A group of what appeared to be giant ants led by some high orcs, halflings, and hobgoblins. Yet, just as they prepared to defend themselves, they heard one of the high orcs leading the group speak up. "Oh, hello there. Those are some neat mounts. I haven't seen any like them before. The antlers are beautiful." The elves lowered their guards slightly as they heard him, with one of them taking off their cloak to reveal their appearance. An older, blonde elf with wise eyes. He was Ellen's father, Erald. "Hello, we noticed the road. I hope that we are allowed to use it. Would that be all right?" Erald asked, with a friendly tone of voice yet still keeping his guard up. The high orc chuckled slightly at the question, nodding his head. "Oh, don't worry about it. We haven't finished the road yet, so there aren't any taxes or fees for usage yet," he explained before snapping his fingers in realization. Ah, that's right. If you're planning on going to Dworgen, make sure you stop by Tempest to grab a pass. Otherwise, you might get fined along the way. Shouldn't be too much since you aren't merchants. Erald nodded at the question. Yet the High Orc spoke again, just as he prepared to motion for everyone to continue. Did you bring enough food and water for your mounts? The High Orc asked with a concerned expression. Would be ashamed to see such beautiful elk be hungry. If you didn't, you can stop by one of our rest spots. Tell M that Hamsam sent you, and they should treat you nicely. After their meeting with the group of monsters, they followed the path until they stumbled upon the resting house Hamsam had mentioned, and to their shock, it was a massive building the size of an inn. Originally, Erald wanted to continue on Tempest, yet he was overruled. Out of sheer interest, the one leading the group wanted to see what exactly was inside. Entering, they noticed it was just as it looked from the outside. An inn, there was a small counter with a goblina behind it, who greeted them with a smile. Originally, this was supposed to be a residence only for Tempest citizens, at least until the road was completed. Yet they were allowed to stay thanks to dropping Hamsam's name, who appeared to be quite popular. The beds were surprisingly comfortable, yet the food captured their attention more than anything. Even while hiding their appearances with their cloaks, most of them were unable to hide the delight they felt from everything they ate. The food was unlike anything they had ever seen, and each ingredient had its unique yet delicious flavor. They even managed to befriend some of the monsters and Majin who were working on the road, and gave them some helpful tips for when they got Tempest. After leaving the strange yet lovely inn, they continued on their way to Tempest. The closer they got, the more traffic they saw, with countless different monsters moving up and down, diligently working. It was wild to see that the inn they had stayed in was not one of a kind. They stumbled upon one every 6 to 10 hours of travel. All of them were built with the same quality level and served the same delicious food. It was when they were 12 hours from Tempest that they felt themselves being watched from the shadows. Yet they had expected it, so they simply continued to move closer. They were inside of homunculus bodies, so even if they were attacked and destroyed, they would be unharmed in their real bodies. It would sour their relationship with Tempest, but it would also give them more information about Tempest. Without stopping, they finally arrived at Tempest City, the capital, where 2 different lines were formed. There weren't any protective walls at the moment since the city kept expanding, yet there was still a checkpoint for visitors. Residents from Tempest were allowed to move freely inside and outside, but the visitors from other nations had to go through a different line where the guards would check them. Thankfully, the visitor line was almost empty except for a few traveling merchants from Dworgen. As they finally reached the gate, they were greeted by a pair of Kijin guards around special A2 rank. Welcome to Tempest. What is the purpose of your visit? One of the guards asked, his tone polite but firm. Erald began before they noticed someone appear next to the guard, a beautiful woman with pure white hair and piercing red eyes. Erald couldn't help but shiver at the woman's gaze. Some deep part of him told him that she was not to be messed with. There is no need, Karu. We've been expecting them. The woman reassured the guard, causing the guard to instantly nod and move to the side. Amongst the elves, one of the cloaked ones reacted the moment they saw her, their body jolting in surprise. A reaction Testarossa didn't miss, which caused her to smile. Please follow me. I will have one of our people look after your mounts. Testarossa offered with a smile as a dragonet emerged from the shadows next to them. The elves dismounted and began to follow the woman through the bustling streets of Tempest. Their eyes darted around, taking in every detail. Ellen is a good friend of Lord Rimuru, so we hope we can create a friendly relationship with Sarion. Testarossa began as she led them casually using Ellen, a familiar name, to try to lower their guard. She mentioned to us that she was going to contact you, so we made sure to make the proper preparations for your arrival. If you wish, we can provide you with a guided tour. Testarossa guided the group of elves through the grand halls of the Chancellor's building, her footsteps echoing softly against the polished wooden floors. As they reached a set of intricately carved doors, Testarossa paused, offering the group a reassuring smile before pushing the doors open. The room inside was a large space filled with natural light from tall windows. Sitting at the head of the table was Rimuru, who was completely concealing all of his power. The moment they entered, he offered them his usual smile. Shion stood behind him, her body appearing relaxed, but her eyes remained focused in case anyone attacked. Yet, it was the sight of Ellen, seated near Rimuru, that caused the biggest stir among the elves. She had a slightly awkward expression as she saw her dad walk in, the only one of the elves with his cloak lowered. She felt very out of place in such an important meeting, but after Rimuru had asked her to help her mediate should anything happen, she couldn't help but agree. Elian? Irald's eyes widened in surprise as he spotted her, his voice filled with a mixture of concern and confusion. Hey, Dad, Ellen answered, a slightly sheepish smile on her face as she waved awkwardly. For a moment, the formal atmosphere of the room was broken. However, Irald quickly regained his composure. Straightening his posture, Irald's expression became focused as he turned to the two rulers. I apologize, Sir Tempest, Sir Dwargo. I was caught off guard for a moment, he said, placing his hand on his chest before offering a respectful bow. I am Irald Grimwald, one of the representatives of Sarion. However, there is someone else I should introduce. Taking a step forward, one of the elves raised their hands to remove the cloak covering their head. Long silverish blue hair emerged from the cloak, accompanied by the beautiful face of an elf. She had jade-green eyes, and she quickly focused on Rimuru. Gazel's eyes widened in shock as he saw her. Yet Grimwald was the first to speak as he stepped back and offered another bow. His voice became more formal as he introduced her. The Divine Empress Elmesia, El-Ru Sarion. Elmesia nodded as one of the other elves moved to pull her chair, and as she sat, she addressed them. I apologize for the dramatic reveal. She began, a hint of amusement lacing her voice. Though it was clear this was a small test of itself. It would have caused a stir had anyone known I had left Sarion. But I felt I should personally come for this meeting, and it would have been informal to greet you in an appearance other than my own. Notice, all of the elves are currently inside of an artificial body. A full analysis has been completed, saving data for future experimentation. Without missing a beat, Raphael moved to gather more information. Though Elmesia raised an eyebrow after being analyzed, she said nothing. Her eyes narrowed slightly after a few more moments. Warning: the subject, Elmesia, is attempting to analyze you. Do you wish to block the attempt? Due to the strength of the analysis, it is believed she also possesses an ultimate skill. Blocking the analysis has a 78% chance of revealing that you possess an ultimate skill. Yes, Rimuru answered, it would be a subtle way of showcasing his power. Elmesia's narrowed eyes quickly returned to normal, her expression completely under her control. With the room now fully settled, Testarossa stepped forward, positioning herself behind Rimuru with the grace of a seasoned diplomat. Currently present, she began, her voice clear as she began to introduce everyone. The Emperor, Rimuru Tempest, ruler of Tempest. Beside him, we have the Hero King, Gazel Dwargo, ruler of the armed nation of Dwargon. And, of course, the Divine Empress, Elmesia El-Ru Sarion, ruler of Sarion. As Testarossa finished with the introductions, she took a step back. There was some slight tension as everyone was waiting for Rimuru to speak. He would be the one to set the tone for the meeting. If dealing with other nobles, he might have taken a more formal approach. However, after speaking with Elian, he knew the best way to connect with Elmesia was to ease her into a casual conversation slowly. Elmesia was the kind of ruler who would much rather pass on her responsibilities to others, choosing instead to laze around and relax. The fact that she had appeared personally was enough to show how seriously she was taking this. Empress Elmesia, it's an honor. Rimuru began, his smile turning friendly. Ellen told me a bit about you, so it's quite a surprise to meet you so soon. Elmesia's eyes didn't leave his, barely acknowledging her friend. However, it was mainly to protect her while she gauged Rimuru's response. Elian has shared some details about you as well. Emperor Rimuru, Elmesia replied, addressing him by the title Testarossa had used. Her voice was calm, almost too calm, as if she were testing the waters. Though I do wonder about the necessity of including her in this meeting. While it's always a joy to see an old friend, I can't help but feel she might not be entirely comfortable. Ellen hesitated to speak, but she found courage and cleared her throat. Hey, so, she began, shaking her head to focus before speaking again, now more confidently. If you all want me to leave, that is fine. However, there is something I wanted to say. The room fell silent, all attention shifting to Ellen as she took a deep breath, centering herself. I know it's not my place, she continued, her voice stronger now. But I believe Shion and Tempest could have a great friendship. Sir Rimuru is a good person, and he genuinely cares about his empire and his allies. You only have to walk through Tempest streets to see how happy the people are. As she finished, Ellen's confidence wavered, and she glanced at Elmesia as if seeking reassurance, worried she might have overstepped. I agree. Gazel spoke up, taking the attention off the group from Ellen. Dworgen and Tempest have become good allies. We have seen nothing but benefits since forming our friendship. Elmesia's expression didn't change as she heard both Ellen and Gazel. Yet her mind was running extremely fast as she analyzed all of the words. I see, Elmesia finally murmured, a soft smile curving her lips as she turned her attention back to Rimuru. I've heard about Tempest's alliance with Dworgen, but I must admit, I didn't realize the bond was as close as it appears to be. Initially, it seemed like a straightforward trading agreement. Could you elaborate on how the two of you came to be such close allies? Rimuru returned her smile, though he sensed the underlying challenge in her question. Gazel's earlier statement had only heightened her suspicions. She was testing him, probing for inconsistencies or hidden motives. It was true that Tempest and Dworgen had a fairly superficial relationship, serving mainly as a simple trading agreement. So Elmesia must have instantly caught that something was wrong. We happen to have learned from the same teacher, Rimuru answered. It was a chance meeting, but we formed a friendship from it. Sadly, at the time, Tempest was not in a place to offer much more than the roads and trading agreement. Elmesia nodded, not revealing any of her emotions, though her eyes flicked briefly to Gazel, who returned the gesture with a subtle nod of agreement. It was clear to Rimuru that Elmesia was far too shrewd to take anything at face value, as Gazel had warned. She would scrutinize every word, every gesture, extracting as much information as she could from their. Recognizing this, Rimuru decided it was time to take control of the conversation. If he allowed Elmesia to guide the discussion, he risked being subtly led into revealing more than he intended. Elmesia, Rimuru began, his voice taking a more casual tone. We both understand the real reason for your visit. Let's not dance around the issue any longer, shall we? Elmesia raised an eyebrow, intrigued by his direct approach. It wasn't often that someone spoke to her so informally. Ellen has already informed you, so there's no need to hide it. Rimuru continued, his gaze steady on hers. I have awakened as a demon lord and joined the Demon Lord Council as one of the Ennead. Elmesia smiled slightly as she heard him, her head tilting slightly in interest. I didn't expect you to address it so openly, Elmesia remarked, her tone carrying a hint of amusement. However, that does make things easier. Her expression then shifted, becoming more serious as she continued. Demon Lord Rimuru Tempest, before we discuss any potential alliances, I must ask as a Demon Lord, what are your true goals? Rimuru couldn't help but chuckle at the question, his soft laughter easing the tension in the room. I feel like we are quite similar, Elmesia. Rimuru answered, his eyes meeting hers without hesitation. He even used her name directly to bridge between the formalities. All I want is to be able to relax in some peace and quiet. I want to be able to spend the rest of my days enjoying the life I was given. Everything I have done has been for that single purpose. Elmesia studied him for a long moment, her sharp eyes searching for any sign of deception. She knew better than to take such statements at face value, especially from a demon lord. Yet, there was a calm certainty in Rimuru's words that made her pause. You speak of peace and quiet. You say you are like me? Elmesia said, her voice calculated. But the path you've chosen is one of power and influence. Since you have decided to be straightforward, I will be too. You destroyed Falmouth's army, and then sent your own people to turn it into your vassal nation. Her smile widened slightly, her gaze never wavering from his as she probed deeper. A marriage with Demon Lord Fry, a war with Gistav and Demon Lord Clayman, and the potential alliance with Demon Lord Carrion. Not to mention your decision to join the Demon Lord Council. Your actions speak louder than your words, Rimuru. What assurances do I have that you won't become a threat to the entire West? Though it was clear she didn't have all of the facts, she was surprisingly well informed. The war with Gistav had been mostly secretive, so she must have spies keeping an eye on his territory who noticed Shuna's invasion. Rimuru leaned forward slightly, his smile turning more genuine as he considered her words. We both know that peace and quiet requires more than good intentions. Rimuru answered. Peace and quiet won't come without the strength to defend it. My nation is composed mainly of monsters and Majin, and we're often seen as enemies of humanity. If we can't defend ourselves, we'll be wiped out without a second thought. Elmesia's smile softened, becoming more genuine as she listened to his response. She had lived long enough to see through most facades, and she could tell when someone was putting on an act. Rimuru's words, however, rang true. Despite his calculated attempts to influence her, such as bringing Ellen into the discussion, his sincerity was undeniable. The room went silent for a few moments, with Elmesia carefully thinking for a moment before speaking up. You are right, Elmesia conceded, adjusting herself in her seat to be more comfortable. Now, how about we talk about that alliance? Chapter 59, The Three-Nation Alliance. At first, Rimuru was fully committed to keeping Tempest technology confined within the borders of his nation. He had even intentionally stifled his sharing of technology with Dworgen in the past. The growth potential was practically unparalleled when it came to his people, so by freely sharing, he would be losing out in the long run. Back then, their alliance with Dworgen was still new. It would have been risky to share too much too soon, as trust hadn't fully developed yet. Dworgen might have seen Tempest as weak and try to take advantage of them. In politics, it's often safer to take things slow. It was find a way to bit and evaluate the relationship between nations. Most of his people had long lifespans, and he was practically ageless now. As long as he wasn't killed, he would never die. Even if it took another 50 years to reach all of the technology and research he envisioned, that would have been completely fine. He had all the time in the world. In fact, by keeping their technology to themselves, Tempest would have eventually pulled so far ahead of the rest of the world that other nations would have been forced to ally with them just to keep up. Tempest was practically guaranteed to become the leading power in the West in time. Yet, that was the issue time. Even with Raphael, and even with all of his talented researchers, their technology was branching in an entirely different route. They could grow plants unlike any other kingdom in the world. The extremely hard-to-grow hypocute herbs were spreading so fast they would have a practically unlimited supply of full potions. However, his people were struggling to create full potions without his help. Then there was the clothing and weapons, all of them of extremely high quality. The clothing was mainly due to the monsters from which they got the materials. And the weapons were all thanks to Q-Robe and his team, all of them working together to experiment and improve. Q-Robe had become a beast of blacksmithing. He had even received a unique skill for his efforts. Q-Robe could consistently make unique grade equipment, and even legend-grade equipment if he had the proper materials. Yet even though their weapons became of higher and higher qualities, they were starting to run into a slight supply issue. They had enough supplies of Magisteel to last them for at least a decade. With Veldora out, as long as they had a supply of steel, they could continue mass-producing it. However, silver and gold were not as abundant in Tempest. Without those materials, they would not be able to create mithril or orichalcum. Falmouth was mainly a trading country, acting as a bridge between the West and the East for merchants. The mining resources were not enough to supply Tempest. If anything, the one thing they could provide was land to grow more hypocute herbs and food. Fulbrosia offered a different kind of resource. Gems and crystals that held potential for magical and technological applications. However, these resources were still in the experimental phase, and it was unclear how they could be leveraged to address Tempest's immediate needs. As for Gistav, the resources inside of it were still a relative mystery. It was mostly marshlands, yet he couldn't put all of his eggs in that basket, hoping that the underground city would be stacked with resources. Gistav was unexplored, Clayman had made no efforts to further expand beyond the few small towns and villages that were scattered around his territory. What he needed now was to prepare for the future, even if that meant sacrificing some of Tempest's secrets. All the secrets and knowledge in the world wouldn't mean anything if Tempest was destroyed. At this point, the stronger Tempest's allies were, the better. Though he also wouldn't allow the secrets to spread like wildfire. He would work with Gazel and Elmesia to keep the information contained between each other. Elmesia, you were right when you said Tempest's relationship with Dworgen was mainly a trading agreement. Rimuru began, causing a curious smile to appear on her face. However, I believe it's time to evolve that relationship, to forge something more substantial, and I would like you to be a part of it. Oh! Elmesia mused out loud, her smile growing as she tilted her head. It seems we're dropping the formalities, aren't we? You called me by my name, and I called you by yours. How about it, little Gazel? Do you want to join this little game? Her words were light, almost teasing, but Rimuru knew better than to underestimate her. Raphael and Gazel had already warned him that she was someone he shouldn't underestimate. Every word, every gesture was meticulously calculated. Gazel sighed as he heard Elmesia, though he nodded nonetheless. Perhaps it's for the best if we can be more casual. Gazel conceded, his gaze shifting briefly to Elmesia before locking onto Rimuru. I am interested, Rimuru, but I need to know exactly what you're proposing. Looking at Gazel, Rimuru could understand his position. Even though he could tell Gazel wanted to become closer to Tempest, whether it was because they were sword brothers or for another reason, he still kept his kingdom as his main priority. He wouldn't give in without an actual benefit, especially not with Elmesia watching. Our current agreements serve us well. Trade in potions, produce, clothing, and armor, along with the exchange of knowledge. The road Tempest built is already getting plenty of traffic from merchants. Rimuru began, his voice steady and clear. But I believe there's potential for much more. I propose an expanded knowledge-sharing agreement, one that could propel all our nations to unprecedented heights. Elmesia's eyes narrowed slightly as she leaned forward, clearly interested. How much are you expecting Sarion to provide? Elmesia asked. And how much can you provide? Gazel, too, felt a slight discomfort. He had warned Rimuru about bringing up technology, but he had still brought it up nonetheless. Yet he simply kept silent, seeing where he would take things. Rimuru, however, had a slight smile on his face. He had discussed it with Raphael, and they had come up with a plan of attack together. In order to get everything they wanted, they needed to lay out the largest bait they had. Sarion and Dworgen both hold countless secrets. Both have spent countless years researching and improving their technology. He acknowledged, his voice respectful but firm. But every great nation has its failures. Abandoned projects, lost lives, wasted resources. Dworgen, for example, has the remnants of an ambitious golem project that never came to fruition. Gazel's eyes narrowed, but he remained silent, his expression unreadable. Elmesia, on the other hand, was more direct. And what is Sarion? She inquired, her tone a touch cooler now. Are you implying that our advancements have come at a great cost? Rimuru met her gaze without flinching. Notice, after running a thorough analysis of the homunculus bodies the elves are using, a response has been generated. It has an 89.894561% chance of working as planned. I'm not implying anything, he replied calmly, echoing what Raphael had told him. I'm stating a fact. The homunculus bodies you're using now. How many lives, how many souls were lost or damaged in perfection? Elmesia's eyes darkened, but she didn't respond immediately. The room fell into a tense silence for a moment before Elmesia finally spoke up. What are you getting at? Tempest offers something neither Dworgen nor Sarion has ever seen before. A place where innovation can thrive without fear of failure, where even the most dangerous experiments can be conducted without risking the lives or souls of your researchers. A place in which you can obtain in-depth, detailed reports of every single thing that went wrong. In addition, the assistance of our best researchers. Elmesia's eyes widened slightly as she heard him, clearly interested. Though it was Gazel who caved in and asked, what sort of place could possibly offer all of that? Rimuru let out a small, knowing smile before answering the question. The labyrinth of Demon Lord Ramiris, the elemental queen, and my wife. There was a moment of silence in the room before Elmesia let out a soft chuckle. You married Ramiris? She repeated, a mix of disbelief and amusement coloring her tone. I'm not sure whether to admire your bravery or pity your inevitable headaches. Gazel, for his part, couldn't help but sigh as his hand instinctively pinched the bridge of his nose. The moment he thought he had finally learned everything about Rimuru, he gets slapped by another piece of news. The labyrinth, he muttered, his thoughts turning inward as he recalled ancient records passed down through his family. If it's anything like the legends describe, then you're right. My grandfather left behind accounts of the labyrinth in Dworgen, marveling at its mysteries. However, that was before the elemental queen's fall from grace, of course. Elmesia's eyes flickered with surprise, a slight smile slipping through. Uncle Guren visited the labyrinth? She asked, her voice betraying a fleeting softness before she quickly regained her focus. But you raise a valid point, Gazel. I've seen the labyrinth myself in the past, and while I do have a soft spot for Ramiris, it's no secret that her power has waned. She does not have the strength to bring out the full potential of the labyrinth as she is now. Rimuru leaned forward, his eyes focused on hers as he spoke. That would be true under ordinary circumstances, but as you might expect, things are different now. The labyrinth is no longer limited by Ramiris's current magical capacity. Veldora, the storm dragon, is lending his power to keep the labyrinth running at full capacity indefinitely. Using Veldora as a battery was quite handy. It had gotten to the point where even Veldora himself took it as a point of pride. However, it was mainly because it let him release his magicules without care. The storm dragon, she murmured, nodding thoughtfully. It was clear that she recognized the gravity of such a powerful entity being involved. Yet she accepted it without further question, as if acknowledging an inevitability. I can't say I envy you, Gazi, she added with a teasing smile. You must have had it quite rough. Gazel sighed, his hand moving instinctively to pinch the bridge of his nose in exasperation. I would appreciate it if you referred to me by my actual name, Elmesia, Gazel answered, causing her to let out a delightful chuckle. Taking a few moments to give Elmesia a side-eye, Gazel turned to look at Rimuru. You're right, Rimuru. Gazel finally admitted, his voice steady. There are several projects in Dworgen that hold immense potential, but due to malfunctions and inherent dangers, we had to shelve them. In fact, Kaijin personally oversaw one of our failed projects. That project, Rimuru mused, barely containing his smile. Ramiris actually figured out how to make it work. At least with the scraps that were left behind. Gazel's eyes narrowed for a moment, as if trying to spot any lies before shaking his head to himself. Of course she did. Elmesia, who had been quietly assessing the situation, took a moment to gather her thoughts before speaking up. I see. So, by using the labyrinth, you'll have access to any information that passes through it. In exchange for this resource, we would be revealing all our secrets to you. She paused, a light smile forming on her lips, a hint of challenge in her eyes. I have a few projects of my own that I'd like to experiment with, but I'd rather leave them unfinished than reveal them prematurely. That is, unless you're willing to share more with us. After all, as a friend of mine once said, the law of equivalent exchange applies even in diplomacy. With a graceful snap of her fingers, one of the elves accompanying her moved forward, producing a spatial storage bag. From it, he carefully placed a potion, a small dagger, and several seeds and herbs onto the table. Elmesia's eyes never left Rimuru as she continued, her tone both challenging and inviting. If our scientists and researchers are going to be working in the labyrinth, we want to be part of the research and development process for items like these. Here we have a full potion, an almost perfect extract of Hippocute. There's also this dagger, made from a strange metal unlike any we've seen before. At first glance, it seems like simple mithril, but it has properties that allow it to focus and channel magicules far more efficiently. And these seeds, we've been unable to get them to grow in Sarion. There must be a secret to them. Oh, so you are willing to share all of your secrets with Tempest? I must say, you are quite forward, Elmesia. His tone was light, almost teasing, as he asked. She practically asked him to reveal everything for what could amount to useless information. Elmigia laughed once again as she heard him. I am simply being honest. Though impressive, Sarion is an empire of knowledge for a reason. The countless records and years of experimentation we hold are worth more than a better lab. Gazel, too, seemed to get lost in thought as he heard Elmigia. Yet before the conversation could take a turn, Rimuru shook his head. You misunderstood me. The labyrinth is just the cherry on top. The real offer is the collaboration between Tempest, Dworgen, and Sarion. Or, to be more precise, Tempest assistants. We might not have as many secrets and experiments as Dworgen. With a fluid motion, Rimuru caused a few papers to materialize in his hand. He handed them to Testarossa, who gracefully placed them in front of both Gazel and Elmigia. The papers contained detailed schematics and analyses that immediately captured their interest. Elmigia and Gazel exchanged glances, their initial reservations giving way to surprise and intrigue. This, Elmigia began, her voice trailing off as she reviewed the documents, her usual composure faltering for a moment. But you can't deny our capabilities. Rimuru finished with a smile. In front of Gazel lay the schematics of the golem Ramiris had recovered, complete with experimental improvements and annotations written by Raphael, drawing inspiration from her design of Beretta. The golems held countless potential, but it would be a waste of months, if not years, to recreate all of the information Dworgen held. Elmigia, on the other hand, scrutinized the papers detailing the analysis of her own homunculus body. The documents delved into the material's composition and construction, but the most concerning section addressed the vulnerability of the soul fragment used to control it. Since controlling a homunculus requires a fragment of your soul, she had prepared countless defense measures. Enough protection to buy time for the soul fragment to escape and return to the user. In theory, even if an all-out fight were to occur, she should have enough time to escape unharmed. Yet unfortunately, or fortunately for her, Asmodeus' domain was life, death, and souls. Using it, Raphael could clearly see a small gap in her defenses, a weak spot that would allow anyone with control over souls to strike directly. It was thanks to Asmodeus that Raphael was able to warn Rimuru that countless souls must have been harmed in order to create the current homunculus, because she could see just how well protected it was. For Elmigia, the scariest part was not just the fact that a weakness had been found, but that the entire report had been written while they talked. The analysis wasn't just thorough, it was alarmingly precise, written in real time during their conversation. The homunculus bodies she and her knights used were the pinnacle of Sarion's technological achievements, unique and carefully guarded secrets that were never meant to be understood by outsiders. That Rimuru could present such detailed insights so casually spoke volumes about his capabilities. Had she been dealing with anyone else, Elmigia might have seen this as a veiled threat, a demonstration of power meant to intimidate her into compliance. Under different circumstances, she would have considered retreating immediately, unwilling to risk the security of her nation's most precious secrets. But something in Rimuru's demeanor, his calm confidence, his measured words, convinced her that his intentions were genuine. Still, she knew she couldn't proceed without addressing the elephant in the room. Ironically enough, just as he had said before, she saw much of herself in him. Placing the papers back down on the table, Elmigia's entire body language shifted to something more serious. Emperor Rimuru Tempest, before we continue, there is something I want to guarantee. She began, addressing him by his title rather than by just his name. What is it, Empress Elmigia? Rimuru answered. In the past, Demon Lord Fry attacked Sarion. Our history has seen its share of conflicts and betrayals, and I cannot ignore the reality of that past. If we are to move forward with any treaties and agreements here today, I must know that they will be honored not only by Tempest, but by your vassal kingdoms and allies. Specifically, I need to ensure that Fulbrosia, where Demon Lord Fry reigns, will also uphold any agreements we make. I cannot agree to a trade of knowledge or to an alliance without guarantees that neither Tempest nor Fulbrosia will pose a threat to Sarion. Rimuru couldn't help but smile as he heard her. A pact of non-aggression? Yes. I can guarantee that Fry won't mess with Sarion again. Unless we are attacked first, Tempest has no intentions to threaten any other kingdoms. Rimuru had to hold back his laughter as he remembered Frey's explanation some time ago. She simply wanted to be the queen of the skies and have her throne set in the highest spot in the world. The tree in Sarion was far taller than her current kingdom, but he was working on building a massive tower for her so that she could claim the highest spot in the sky for herself. As much as Fry liked to set herself up as a cunning and calculating queen, she could also be quite simple from time to time. Good. In that case, we can finalize our alliance and settle our terms.